spending Bitcoin died, and it became this, number go up. And ultimately, I think if that's all Bitcoin is, then it runs the risk of the greater fool theory, right? It has to become a money eventually.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
Hello, Isabel. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited to have you here. Yeah, we've been getting to know each other pretty well the past month or so. For folks who don't know you, you are the director of engineering at Mara.
Yes.
And also the lead architect of Anduro.
And apparently the black marble on socials.
And the black marble on socials for anyone. You'll be tagged, so people will know how to find you. But yeah, so lead architect of Anduro, which I don't know, if that many folks actually know that Mara has sort of dipped their toe in the L2 game, at least on the incubation level. Mara decided, I'd be actually curious, you share the story a little bit of like how Mara decided to get into this game. Like they are incubating this decentralized layer 2 platform, which we'll get into a little bit more depth about what Anduro does and how it works. But I think it would be nice to kind of start with, how this decision came about for Mara. It's not a totally conventional decision for them.
Well, yeah, Mara brought me on specifically to work on the sidechain effort because they wisely realized, hey, we're going to have these halvings here from here on out. We can't guarantee that the price of Bitcoin will always double along with those halvings. And on top of that, fee revenue is not assuredly will come up to par to replace it over time as the block reward subsidy wanes. So, hey, we need to do something about this. How do we get more revenue to make mining a sustainable action and continue with what they're doing? So then cue me coming in, and they said, well, how do we go about doing this? And, I said, well, it's been tried before. Never to great success in the past. But I came up with the concept of Anduro, which is a merged mine / strong federation. So think if Liquid and Rootstock had a baby.
Okay.
So it has elements of both, which is highly important because you have certain risks and trade-offs with merge mining that can be mitigated, especially if you're on a minority chain. Like if not everybody merge mines it, it's much more susceptible to attack, right? It's always going to be susceptible to attack of its proportion. So if Mara has 5% of the hash rate, and they are the only one merge mining, then it only takes, one other large pool to decide to attack, and it's completely dead. So, we have to mitigate that. We have to guard against it. And how we guard against that is through
as much of a decentralized federation.
Well, no, yeah, we use a federation to do a fork choice rule for the sidechains themselves. So in the event of a fork or an attack, a 51% attack, they just orphan the attacker after a couple blocks, and it's no big deal.
Okay, so let's back up for a second. Okay, so Mara actually reached out to you, and they were like, we're aware of this challenge, which is that, block subsidy is declining. Fees at this point are like a very, very, very small percentage of what miners are paid and what make up the current security budget. The belief, right, and sort of I think the assumption by most Bitcoiners is that like the value of fees will rise, at least in fiat denominated terms, enough to incentivize all of these miners against the cost of energy. But that, ultimately we don't have assurances of that, and we should be doing everything we can to mitigate that risk.
Nobody really seems to think about fees and seems to think about the feasibility of mining going forward. Casey Rodemer did, and I remember hearing a lot of people saying, "Oh, ordinals are out. Yeah, the security budget's solved. It'll never be an issue again." Where are we today?
Fair, 100%. To his credit.
Oh no, it was a positive step, and everybody in Mara, when we saw ordinals came out, it was this is amazing. This is good. We need more of this. People are actually paying the miners fee revenue for something interesting on Bitcoin because it had been languishing ever since the block size wars and ever since the lightning centric focus. It was all about paying as minimal fees as possible for as much transactability as you can get.
Right.
And if you move everything off chain into separate layer 2s, none of that currently pays the miners.
And that is most of the narrative of layer 2s, right? Every layer 2 and their mother is basically saying, fees are too expensive. How do we pay less fees? That's literally the entire value.
Right, exactly. And then
layer ones, that's the value prop, right? Like the reason to go to some of these other chains.
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends. It depends too, because one thing about Anduro is Bitcoin focused. It's both capital B Bitcoin focused, the network, and lowercase b Bitcoin focused, the asset, right? So Anduro, importantly, does not have any primary tokens other than derivative tokens of Bitcoin. So each chain, they use separate assets. This is done for compartmentalization and containment. Should something go wrong on one chain, it doesn't nuke the entire Anduro platform, which means we can be a little bit experimental with what we can do with the platform, right?
Yeah.
So and it's completely opt-in. So it doesn't impact anything other than people who have opted in and pegged over to the sidechain.
Right.
So this is very important. And when they peg over to the sidechain, it's a Bitcoin denominated asset. So that means we can do all sorts of different things. And we have two chains.
Let me pause you right there. I want to get all into Anduro, but before we go too deep into Anduro, I want to make sure we're sort of like, establishing the problem that Anduro is trying to solve, right? So we have fees. We have the sort of issue of declining fees. We have, Casey Rodarmore attempted, he didn't really build Ordinals for the purpose of attempting.
No, that wasn't what he was trying to solve necessarily. He was, I think, you probably know more than me. I think he was just trying to have increased expressivity on Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, he was trying to do generative art on Bitcoin. It's a fun game. And so, first of all, is sort of your point of view about the fee dilemma, generally speaking, that we're probably going to be okay and fees will rise in value enough to cover the energy cost, but we should make sure, is it hedge that we need?
No, I mean,
or are you more nervous?
Fees scare me just in general because the way that it works with Bitcoin, and I remember there were a lot of economic discussions of Bitcoin. This was back before the block size wars, and it was theorized, prophesied that we would have this stable backlog. All we had to do is fill up blocks. This was before blocks filled up. They didn't fill up to 2016. So before blocks filled up, nobody knew what would happen once blocks started filling up. And it was thought by many that we would have this stable backlog fee market to where if you paid this much, your transaction would be in about this amount of time, and it was reliable, stable. Fact of the matter is Bitcoin does not work that way. And as is evidenced by Bitcoin and the price doesn't work that way either. You don't have this linear rise of the price. It just shoots up from out of nowhere. Yeah. Same thing for fee market demand, right? So fee market demand, instead of being this stable thing that's going to be predictable, whatever, and it doesn't matter. You could have futures markets for this thing. It doesn't matter. It's still always going to be this way. Since there's a limited supply and it's demand driven, you're always going to have rushes for peaks, and then you're going to have it crash back down to nothing. And that is the nature of the beast. So we'll have potentially long periods of time. It kind of shocks me just that we're seeing here. So we were within 85, 90% of an all-time high right now, and the mempool cleared. So,
no demand for
there's no demand for transactions, and in fact, the ETFs, which that's great for the price, they've made it worse because you don't even have to transact on Bitcoin at all in any degree. I mean, it's totally custodial. I mean, that was always true with the exchanges because you could always keep them on the exchanges, but I mean, with the ETFs, it's like, no, I'm just going to keep dumping my 401k in there. I never actually touch Bitcoin. I never actually have to do a Bitcoin transaction, and that's the system we've built. We've made it intentionally difficult because the bandwidth is capped on Bitcoin. Nobody's building anything that does Bitcoin transactions because they know it's just going to get expensive and get priced out if they do.
Right. There's sort of this fundamental problem where Bitcoin L2s, however you define that, whether you define that as sort of these trust minimized, bridging on solutions, or even just the BlackRocks of the world, which Nifty Nay famously would say is, technically an L2, right? You're pushing your Bitcoin into some other execution environment.
Well, and again, that belies the difference because that's talking about lowercase b, Bitcoin the asset, which is great. We all want the number go up. That's great, right? But it's still reliant on capital B Bitcoin, the network. And that ceases to function if miners don't get paid. If miners don't give, it's just a big bugaboo with the security budget. Everybody I talk to, I feel like they don't understand the security budget because they say, well, at what price does it matter? And I said, half. It doesn't matter what price it is, half. So what happens if you get into a point where suddenly it becomes supremely unprofitable to mine and all the miners say, you know what, this is unprofitable, I'm going to ditch it, then you end up in this upside down scenario where you have all of this mining capacity that's just flooded the market. It's really, really cheap. And you have people, they can just hook it up. And guess what? That's when Bitcoin's vulnerable to attack.
Right.
So if you have all this excess mining capacity out there, it needs to be used productively mining Bitcoin. The single biggest, I've been in Bitcoin for a long time. This is the single biggest thing I think people don't understand about Bitcoin is it's not about technology or fancy cryptography or, there was nothing new about Bitcoin when Satoshi created it. Everything you needed to put it together had been around for at least a decade, right? But what it really is at its core is an alignment of incentives such that all parties involved are incentivized not to attack Bitcoin, but to rather more profitably secure it. And that's what we are putting at risk if we don't pay the miners.
Right. Absolutely. Like the entire asset class just is at risk if we are not paying miners.
Yeah, that's true of any L2, like Arc. If everything goes onto Arc, if everything goes onto Lightning, then none of those. Yeah, they will ostensibly pay the miners because you have to do transactions, but they're never going to pay the miners any more than they have to. And we cannot rely on altruism to be the force stabilizing Bitcoin.
Well, it's so funny you said that because I had Giannis on this morning and he was sort of saying like we might get to a point where Bitcoin is so important, but fees are so low that we're paying to mine, right? That nation states are mining at a loss because it's a
I don't think that's a feasible path forward.
I agree. I
mean, the incentives are definitely underwater there.
I think he was like referencing this as like a theoretical, not a prediction.
Yeah.
But it's just like an interesting thought experiment, right? Like people, I think, underestimate the importance of making sure that we have a fee market as this subsidy declines over time, which is kind of happening faster than people think. So here's the key thing though that was a big aha moment when I met you was there are no L2s really that are paying miners. I mean, there are a couple of merge mining, there are technologies out there, most of which identify as L1s.
A little bit, but yeah, it's a sidechain L1. It depends on your definition of L2.
Rootstock would actually be a really good example, and I just sort of started to learn about Rootstock this morning, chatting with Yaga.
No, but they do actually pay the miners Rootstock. It's just the problem is there hasn't been much uptake, so...
Meaning, like, there's just not much adoption of Rootstock.
No, yeah, there's not much adoption. There hasn't been to date. That's why we're taking a multi-chain strategy.
I was going to say, why do you think Rootstock hasn't gotten adoption?
I honestly don't know. It could be lack of exchange tradability. It could be the fact that Bitcoiners don't like smart contracts, which I think fundamentally, because Rootstock is very old. It's 7 years old.
People who like smart contracts do like Bitcoin. That's
right.
Ordinals prove that.
You want to go to you don't want to try to start your own party. You always want to go where the party's at, right? So why would you try to go to Rootstock where there is nothing going on when you could just go to Ethereum through wrap/BTC? Now, we have our own chain, Alice, and we're trying the same thing because fundamentally, I think there were some missteps and some miscommunications about a currency that they put out that turned a lot of people off because they thought it was, this token was something that was necessary for the network. Come to find out, it's not really necessary for the network, but it was really a bad look for the project. So I don't know. You asked the question, why did Rootstock not take root? I honestly don't know what the reason is.
But Rootstock is basically the only, maybe like what we would call like a proper layer 2 that is merge mining. Everything.
I mean, I wouldn't even call it because it's a side chain. So whether it's a layer 2 or a layer 1, you can't really play these games because it all depends.
That's why I always put the air quotes around it. Yeah. But the other, I think the big distinction here that I'm trying to make is that the other protocol technologies that are merge mining sort of famously are actually L1s, right? Like the core DAOs of the world, for instance.
Yeah. But I mean, again, core DAO, they have their own token, right? So they're
this is a key distinction we'll get to. We'll get to. Okay, so basically Mara sees this, sort of challenge potentially ahead for miners is like, we want to get ahead of this. We want to make sure that, we're doing what we can to mitigate the risk of, declining subsidy budget and make sure that miners are getting fees, make sure that there's a healthy fee market for Bitcoin, whatever we can do to kind of support that mission, which again,
there's narratives, dual reasons. One, of course, is to support Bitcoin through merge mining, paying fees to miners.
Mhm.
The other reason for it to exist is to allow you to do more things with your lowercase b,
Which is the actual use case for users, right?
Yes,
I
exactly.
mean,
users don't care about paying the miners. They just
No.
want it to work, right?
No,
They
no,
just
no.
want to do stuff with their Bitcoin.
Right.
That is the so they're
But there's plenty of
twin goals.
L2s that have user benefits. But the
Mhm.
problem with them basically is that they are not contributing, or like the core problem that you guys are trying to solve is that they do not contribute back to the security budget. So if we can create an L2 that actually does merge mine and contribute to the security budget, that's a better solution for like the health of Bitcoin long term is sort of the thesis.
Right. Because if if you end up, you could end up in this post Bitcoin world where the entire thing collapses and you no longer have the network. You just have this asset floating around that is Bitcoin, and then there's nothing that
But there's nothing to
ensures
protect it.
anything.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
because you've lost proof of work. You've lost everything that Bitcoin was built on by that point in time, and that's quite frankly a future I don't want to see.
So did Mara, just to kind of get the history of this, when you were approached by Mara, did they specifically want to build an L2, or were you thinking, hey, I have, we're chatting about the security budget and I have an idea and I'd like
No, they were looking to build sidechain specifically. Yeah.
They wanted to build
Yeah.
a sidechain
They,
specifically.
yep.
Okay. And they reached out to you. You were formerly working with GM? No.
Yes. So I was chief blockchain architect at General Motors for 4.5 years prior.
What were you working on at GM? It's funny thinking about GM.
Well, if you want, I can go all the way back in my whole history where I started. So my background is, the worst possible. Is I worked for 2 Fortune 10 companies for about 15 years. So the biggest of the big corporates.
The biggest of the big corporates.
Yeah. When I first heard about Bitcoin, I was working at Home Depot.
Okay.
And I was working on something called retail shrink, and I was doing reporting and analytics for shrink, which is basically theft or missing product, right? And Home Depot only does inventories like once a year, so it's this. Here's an unsolvable problem, right?
Okay.
Is you say, okay, well, we have this set of numbers that we verified are there. We have this set of numbers that we projected we should have had. What happened? And so I would spend at my time, I would chart and graph everything, looking through and looking for patterns and trends. And I got really good at it, and I got really, really focused at it, like hyper so. And then, I'm a nerd, so I was just reading stuff offhand, and I kept hearing about Bitcoin and Ars Technica. I actually heard about it in 2010 originally, but I brushed it off. And then I started hearing about it more and more and more, and I said, well, this is dumb. This is a scam. Absolutely. It's my firm belief that if anybody explains something like Bitcoin to you at a high level and you believe them, you are gullible and deserve to lose all of your money. Well, it's the same thing with the meme coins right now. It's just, oh yeah, I'll just throw all my money in there and it'll double, triple. It doesn't work that way. And it takes, with Bitcoin especially, you have to invest time in it to get over that hump and the realization that no, this isn't a scam. This is actually really real. And for me, it wasn't until I saw the price movements and I saw a huge spike up and I said, this is insane. This is a complete bubble. It's going to collapse. And I saw it crash back down, and I said, oh well, yeah, I was right. And then I said, but if it ever comes back, it might be unstoppable. And the next time I saw it, it was up 5x from that. And I was like, oh, shit, now I have to start reading.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So you became obsessed with Bitcoin.
Obsessed with the charts, like initially.
Oh, with the charts?
With the charts, with the price charts. That's what I was obsessed with. And, and I had to understand how it worked. I had to. It just like.
When was this? This was like 2011?
2012.
2012.
Yeah, 2012.
Okay.
And this culminated years later in an article I published, and it's speculative adoption / price theory, and I published it on Medium. But yeah, this was in 2016. The price at the time that I wrote it was $745.
Oh wow!
And it had never been over 1,100. And I claimed that the following year, 2017. That it would have hit a price I called one car at the peak, and it hit $20,000. So
wow.
And so, but yeah, I developed this entire model for the pricing movements of Bitcoin, and it's based on the S-curve technological adoption and repeating exponentially increasing Gartner hype cycles. But it's all in the paper. But that was picked up by Vijay Boyapati, who you may know. He wrote the bullish case for Bitcoin.
Oh, wow.
So my paper is actually chapter 4.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but that was my only.
I didn't realize you were like a price analyst guy back in the day.
Well, I wasn't even that, because like that's the thing is I always love market action stuff like that. But I mean, I'm a big tech nerd, so like as soon as I read the white paper and understand what Bitcoin really was, I was like, oh shit, this is gonna take over everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was there, and I became obsessed with and the paper states this at the beginning. It's not about, I'm not making any arguments for why Bitcoin will succeed. It's what I'm saying is, let's just assume Bitcoin takes over everything.
Right.
Just make that assumption. How is that going to happen? It's not a straight line.
Right. Like what's
it's not a straight line. It's like it's a process, and I still believe everything I wrote in that paper today, and I still see us hitting the same targets in the cycle today. It's still happening. It's
wow.
Crazy.
Wow.
But I mean, that was what got me into Bitcoin, and then but I was into Bitcoin, and what was weird about my day job, because like I was in analytics, and then I moved into data architecture. But yeah, my day was a hedge job. My day job was just a hedge. It was like,
right.
It would be good. But and eventually somebody, a high up director at General Motors, because I had moved on from GM or from Home Depot, I was working at GM. He gave a presentation on Bitcoin, and I refused to watch it because I said a director at GM's giving a presentation.
You're like, this is not going to be good.
So I'm not going to do that. But I was hosting like working sessions. I had 12 devs, and I was basically running a dev sweatshop at the time. We were rewriting the entire sales system for GM Global.
Wow.
The back end data architecture of it. And he's like, well, no, let's just put it on. Let's put it on the background. I was like, okay, fine. He's like, I'm going to hate this, but fine. And he actually understood it. And I was actually at a different building. I said, I told the whole team, I was like, I have to leave right now. And I drove listening to the.
What was his pitch? Because there's a lot of ways to understand Bitcoin. Was he talking about fiat? Like, what was his pitch?
He was describing sound money. Like he was doing a full on sound money description.
Amazing.
Of Bitcoin.
Amazing.
And and I said, oh my God, I have to meet this guy. And, we ended up becoming good friends. And then he actually lobbied for and got me into the role of chief blockchain architect at General Motors.
Oh,
I was
wow.
the only one in the entire company who knew anything about any of the technology.
About like the actual tech underneath.
Yeah. And at the time, it was the entire Don Tapscott, blockchain, not Bitcoin was, and IBM was just shoving it down people's throats at the time.
I believe it. I just spoke about this with Iago.
My job at the time was, the early years, it was very, very fun, because I would get in a room with this director and people would pitch us on their blockchain solution. And it was always 2 salespeople and a PhD.
Oh, man.
My job was to tear that PhD apart. And it was always hilarious because they had read the Bitcoin white paper and they said, well, here's why our solution's so much better than Bitcoin.
Oh, God.
And I was like, you have no understanding of what Bitcoin actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you were at GM, and then how did you get connected with Mara?
Well, so I was at GM, and eventually, unfortunately, the guy who hired me eventually, he passed on, which was really, really sad. And I was working on several projects that never made it to fruition. These were actual, true, like digital currency projects that we were working
interesting.
on. And we got really far with them, but ultimately they were shot down by the finance arm. Because, sadly, I came to the conclusion that Bitcoin will adopt, or their GM will adopt Bitcoin or cryptocurrency or anything like that roughly 5 years after everyone else has. It's just the way it is with these.
Somehow not surprising.
I had these dreams of like changing the world from the inside, and it's just, no, I was beating my head against a diamond wall. And so I took some time after that. I resigned, took some time to regroup, and was taking care of my young kids at home. Mm-hmm. And I said, I really should start doing something again. And I put myself out there, and a recruiter said, yeah, well, we have a miner who's looking at building sidechain. I was like, that's really interesting.
Wow, that's super interesting.
Yeah, and I ended up starting Amara after that, and
because they wanted to build a sidechain.
Yeah, specifically that's what the
merge mined. Mm-hmm. That was the assignment.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so now let's talk about so the first sidechain that you built was coordinate. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, both of them were going on in tandem, and they're both still under development along with other
Did you
pieces.
initially? Because I think this is also something that
They're both actively currently in beta, but yes.
I think that this is a confusion that some folks, I know I had this about Anduro initially, is that so like Anduro is effectively the name of a platform that can theoretically host multiple side chains.
Correct. Anduro hosts n number of chains. Yeah.
N number of chains. Right now, you are working on 2 chains. One is Alice, which is sort of a kind of similar architecture to Rootstock.
Very similar to Rootstock, but it uses a different uses a different model. It uses
for federation.
Yeah, a federated / auxiliary proof of work merge mine model. So it has both elements in it.
Okay. Yeah. And then the second sidechain that you guys are in development with is Coordinate, which is basically a sort of edited fork of Bitcoin.
Yeah, it is. Coordinate's a fork of Bitcoin Core. We changed a couple things.
You changed some interesting things.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about what you changed. Because I think that this is like the core of what Coordinate is, right? I mean, Alice, this sort of rootstock similar EVM on top of Bitcoin, very, very utilitarian, makes a lot of very like kind of obvious use case, I think, for EVM and Solidity developers. But Coordinate is very unique. I mean, there's no other Bitcoin L2s like Coordinate. Fractal would be the most similar, and it's so different.
I mean,
and it's so different. It won't even
there's
compare.
Elements of Liquid, elements of Fractal, but it's different.
Very different.
Yeah.
Very different. So let's just talk a little bit about what Coordinate is as an L2, because I think it's sort of the most unique, interesting architecture L2 on Enduro's platform, and a little bit about the inspiration of the architecture there. So my initial understanding from you was that you wanted to build an L2 that was a fork of Bitcoin that was, you call it Bitcoin native. I would say kind of like Bitcoin user friendly.
It's Bitcoin ecosystem, and it's again, I remember what it was like to use Bitcoin in 2013, 2014, before the block size wars, before everything became Lightning focused, Lightning centric. And it was just such a joy. It was such a joy to use, such a joy to show people. And
it's for Bitcoin lovers. It's for people who love to use Bitcoin under the hood.
Yeah, well, it's for people who actually have ever had the experience of the Bitcoin wallet, and it's transcendent. I mean, I want Bitcoin to be usable in that manner again. I mean,
when you say the Bitcoin wallet, what does that mean for folks who are new? I mean, that's like before my time, the Bitcoin. I don't even know what this means, the Bitcoin wallet.
No, not the Bitcoin. Well, there was the
Was
Bitcoin.
there like an implementation?
It was actually like literally, there was an Android wallet called Bitcoin. Andreas Schillbach wrote it, but I mean, it was just like, that was one of, there's so many Bitcoin wallets. But back in the day, it was very simple, very straightforward, very easy to use Bitcoin. And it was just, you get people on, you start explaining to them, oh, here's the sound money, and oh, by the way, it's really cheap, really easy to use. And that was part.
How much under the hood, like when you say using Bitcoin, like the way you described it, like, oh, we're building Coordinate, which is a fork of Bitcoin, like the way people used to use Bitcoin. I'm like, well, how is that different than the way they use it now?
Oh, you can't use Bitcoin like you used to because
the wallets are different?
No, blocks filled up. And, back before the block size wars, it was very different because when you send a Bitcoin confirmation, or when you send a Bitcoin with even zero comp, you just assume that it confirms, right? Because there was always room in the next block, so it would just pop in there, even if you didn't pay very much, right?
Okay.
So that was the experience. Now we're in a world where it's full RBF. We have full mempool RBF, which means, anytime you send a transaction, it could be waiting in the mempool for who knows how long, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to bump it, and you have to bump it, and you play this bumping game of fee. So you don't want to spend too much on your fees,
unless you're just impatient and you'll spend whatever.
Well, no. I mean, it's a thing. Is your rational intent is to try to underbid, and then okay, well, it didn't go through, so I have to bump it up a little bit more because nobody wants to overpay, right? And that's something we've actually managed to fix in Coordinate for a certain subset of the transactions. If you do the premium transactions in Coordinate, what it allows you to do is it changes the entire fee model. Right. So now instead of having this RBF bumping fee guessing game, it actually works as a reverse Dutch auction. Right. So for a given set of block space, you never actually overpay for your transaction because you don't pay any more than you have to. And in fact, you don't specify your fee. What you specify is the maximum amount of fee that you're willing to pay.
Okay, so let's just back up because
Yeah.
this is super interesting. This is interesting feature of coordinate number one. So if you think about coordinate and the way it works, it's a fork of Bitcoin with some edits is the way that I like to think about it. Edit number one, Dutch auction fee mechanism, meaning everyone offers whatever fee they want to offer, but then when the transaction is actually, when that block is actually mined, the fees that are actually used and go to the miners are just everyone pays the lowest fee that managed to get into that block.
Yeah, so the way that it works is everybody bids, and then the blocks, because they're processed by the Federation members, they have a set epoch. So you have a set window of time that they're in. So it compares them, processes them in a FIFO order. So we have actually a MEV resistance, and that's a whole nother can of worms describing how that plays out. But yeah, we have a MEV resistance because it's processed in a first in, first out order for these transactions.
Okay.
So.
And so this is, by the way, this is how we're addressing the fee problem without actually, like, we're making fees cheaper while still paying miners.
Well, it's
basically
a totally different experience too, because if you send it, you don't, it'll be processed. Those transactions are processed within a minute. So you will know either it did go or did not go definitively in a minute, right? So okay.
So faster confirmation.
So faster confirmation for your transaction.
But also just cheaper fees, right? Like essentially this is a way to kind of have like a very fair fee market where people are paying.
That was the goal, yeah.
Right?
To a fairer fee market.
Everyone's paying the lowest common denominator of fees, but fees are still being paid. I think this is like, I think we've spoken about this before off camera, where we're just like sort of like the moderate path, right? You're paying miners, but you're also modulating the fee market a little bit such that like no one's overpaying something that like their brother didn't have to pay in that block.
Well, and the beauty of doing this on a side chain is it's not like we're trying to propose a block size increase for Bitcoin. That's not what we're trying to do, but we can affect one on the side chain, and it doesn't impact Bitcoin's immutability, security, or decentralization in any way.
We're having fun. This is the whole.
It's like it's completely opt-in, but you get to use the lowercase b denominated Bitcoin, or at least an IOU for it because it's a side chain. But yeah,
this is sort of the magic of Coordinate, is that it's kind of this like playground to experiment.
And we're enabling OpCat and everything else.
Is that official? I don't know if we've said that out loud yet.
We are enabling OpCat for Coordinate. I mean, Liquid's had it for quite a while now, so it's on side chains. It's funny with OpCat because nobody really cares for side chains because everybody wants it on Bitcoin. Because if you have it on Bitcoin, you can build whatever layer 2s you want for rollups or anything like that because you have full expressivity.
Right.
So, but yeah,
so it's like this research playground, basically. Like that's something that I've sort of thought about with this project. Is like it's a bit of a research playground to experiment with what's possible on Bitcoin.
I'm hoping
without actually harming Bitcoin or touching Bitcoin or changing Bitcoin.
I'm hoping it'll actually, people will start using it for payments again, because there's been completely a lack of any ability to do payments. Like, I bought a computer off Newegg, or parts for a computer off Newegg in 2014. Like, Dell accepted Bitcoin in 2015. Microsoft accepted Bitcoin in Newegg, Overstock.com. There were lots of places you could just spend your Bitcoin at, and then like blocks filled up, and now you had RBF, zero comp wasn't a thing, and just like it died.
Yeah.
So that was over 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
Spending Bitcoin died.
Yeah.
And it became this, number go up, and ultimately, I think that if that's all Bitcoin is, then it runs the risk of the greater fool theory, right? If you don't actually use Bitcoin for anything, it can't be a good store of value because it's a good store of value. That's tautological. It has to become a money eventually.
Medium of exchange. That's how you're
meaning a medium of exchange. Yeah. And I mean, there was always, the plan was of Lightning. And, you see where Lightning is today with Taproot Assets and Tether. I just can't get excited about using something that is theoretical Bitcoin transactions to transact with a unit of account that is not Bitcoin. To me, it's just like, at what point are we talking about Bitcoin?
So this is maybe a good opportunity for us to chat about like the kind of distinct features of coordinate versus Lightning, for instance. A lot of people obviously will say that the reason that they love Lightning so much is because of permissionless
Yeah, well,
exit.
unilateral exit. Yeah, which is
Exactly.
something we can't currently offer. I mean, so the whole goal, we start out with federation, but the whole goal is to eventually move away from that to a more trustless pegging mechanism,
Right.
whatever that may be. But I mean, there's a lot of problems now you see with the ones that are emerging. It be data availability or be it, you can operate pretty succinctly, but I mean, then you lose quantum resistance, which is another big bugaboo with everything in Taproot and everything that Taproot Assets done. Yeah,
let's
it's not.
let's underscore this. Let's pause because
Yeah.
I want to dig into. I want people to understand this. I'm not even sure I fully understand this, but
Yeah.
this is super important. So you have these layer twos, basically. I think probably it sounds like the strongest contender in sort of the public mind share right now for most trustless option being built, not
Mhm.
existing yet, really, not like super workable right now, but
Yeah.
that is in development, are sort of these BitVM zero knowledge proof style bridges, right? Into and out of Bitcoin.
Well, yeah, everything's using Taproot. Yeah.
Everything's right. Oh, okay. So this is why those options right now are currently not quantum resistant because
Yes.
Taproot addresses are uniquely not quantum
So
resistant.
with Taproot address, it's funny, a little bit of history, right? Satoshi's original coins were pay to public key, so the public key was exposed. Gavin Andreessen came in and well, I don't know if it was Gavin who implemented this. I'm sure the old timers know, but they determined that no, you have to hash that. It's a simple step, and if you hash that, you're not obfuscating your public key, or you are
privacy
obfuscating your
benefits on
public
your
key.
public
There's
key.
huge privacy benefits at the time, which privacy benefits have kind of waned and gone away because you can track anything nowadays. It's
Yeah,
if
people are
if you're on
reusing
Bitcoin,
like
it's
crazy.
trackable. I just assume pseudonymous isn't
Sure.
a thing, but even beyond that, it does give you quantum resistance because you're not revealing the public key until you actually spend it. And that's the way
Address
Bitcoin. So
types.
Bitcoin was natively quantum resistant for from 2012 to Taproot. As long as you didn't reuse addresses.
And let's back up even further.
Yeah.
I think that most people do not understand this. I think most people are completely unaware of how quantum computing threatens Bitcoin and how that's going to work and what the solution is. So my understanding, I just learned this in the past couple of months.
Yeah.
Is that the basically the threat of quantum computing is such that quantum computers can effectively break ECDSA cryptography, which is the cryptography that connects public and private keys, such that you could derive someone's private key from their public key with an effective or proficient enough quantum computer. Am I getting that right?
No, that's correct.
Okay. So that is the potential threat that we're dealing with quantum computing. Pretty big threat. That means that any address type that includes a public key address is vulnerable to
or one that
quantum
does it
computing
that's
attacks.
actually been spent from too. Yeah. So if you reuse addresses, they're no longer quantum safe. But correct.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm with you. So the very, very first address type that Satoshi ever used had a public key visible within it. So that was not quantum secure. The public key was like right there.
There's like a couple million coins that are out there
that are just not quantum resistant, you guys. Let's see what happens
they were
there.
mined and never moved. Yeah.
We should actually, I'm going to have Hunter Beast on the show on Saturday and I'll
He's
ask
the guy
him
to
more
talk
about
to.
this.
Yeah.
But yeah, then people started hashing the public key, created address types that hash the public key so that these address types became effectively, I won't say quantum secure, but quantum resistant. And then Taproot addresses came on the scene. And again, public keys were, public within Taproot addresses. And
yeah, this was a decision made so that they could use TapTweak and, play games with the public key for off-chain purposes.
Oh, really?
That's
why.
Yeah, it's well, all the stuff that Taproot Assets is doing relies on this mechanism. So that's why it was made. Yeah.
Specifically Taproot Assets? You think Taproot Assets was the reason why they just
I mean, I don't know.
Do you think Lightning Labs? I was going to say, do you think Lightning Labs folks had an influence in this?
Well, not influence. I'm sure there was collaboration because you had Peter and a couple of others who were, building Taproot, but they were building it specifically with this Lightning network layer 2 future in mind.
In mind.
So like they were doing the layer 1 component to enable it, and that's what both SegWit and Taproot were about. And in Taproot, it's interesting because most people don't really know what Taproot is. It's like, but what Taproot is actually, it's a combination of two things, and I'm probably not doing it justice, but it's MAST and Schnnor signatures. So that's one of the things is currently on Bitcoin, there is no way to execute a Schnnor signature without with it being quantum resistant,
without a public key visible, without a not unhashed
right, exactly.
Key.
So that's the only thing. And
but Schnnor also is theoretically supposed to have privacy benefits, is my understanding. I don't fully.
Well, it's through signature aggregation. So like, yeah, the privacy benefits in Schnnor comes through signature aggregation
for like multi-sigs for Frost. For
right, exactly. Frost is a Schnnor implementation, right?
I see.
So yeah, and what that entails is, you have an aggregate key, and the aggregate key could contain all, the input key. You don't know which one's signed. So,
but individual Taproot addresses are not quantum secure.
Correct.
And cannot be quantum secure if they're to be
non and pay to pay to Taproot addresses. They are literally a public key.
But even if even if you have pay to Taproot addresses and you were like, oh, we screwed up, like we should actually like hash these and make Taproot addresses with hashes, that wouldn't work because the Schnnor signature implementation.
No, that would work if you wanted to use Schnnor for SNIGAG, if you wanted to use that, but you couldn't use. What you lose is the ability to use tap tweak, and tap tweak is the actual consensus mechanism for all the stuff that Lightning Labs is doing.
Okay, so tap tweak is the consensus mechanism for Taproot assets.
Yeah. That's for what they use.
And that's why all Taproot addresses basically are not quantum resistant right now.
Because they have to have the public key in order to tweak it. Because otherwise,
this is very interesting information. Yeah. So if we make quantum resistant Taproot addresses that are usable for Frost, for instance.
Yeah, you could use Frost with those, and they'd be shielded by the hash, but you couldn't use them for these tap tweak games, right? Yeah, but I mean that's okay. That could be a different signature type. So instead, you would have P2TR the way they have it, and then have like P2TRH, just a hash version of it alongside it.
Okay.
But
how did we get onto quantum resistance? I forget how we got onto quantum resistance.
We were talking about ZK proofs because snarks are not quantum resistant.
Okay, so all of these L2s that are being built right now are dependent on Taproot addresses that are not quantum resistant. They could, though, be saved, it sounds like, if we created quantum resistant Taproot addresses. They are not, it's not the same as like Lightning Labs where this Taproot thing is dependent on public keys being available. We could theoretically.
It's different things because you can embed stuff because there's two parts to Taproot. There's Schnnor signatures and MAST, which is Merkleized. It's a signature tree. So basically, what it is, in layman's terms, it's been a long time since I read the paper, but basically, what it is it gives you multiple key spend paths, right? And you only see the root, right? So you're able to publish an address. And then you can have one key spend path that says it's a multi-sig between you and me. And you can have another key spend path that's just a single sig with an unlock time or whatever. So you can have all these different conditionals, but nobody sees any of the conditionals by looking at the blockchain. So they don't know if it's a Lightning address or they don't know if it's just a pay to. You don't know any, you just know this is the public key of it. And then one valid path can spend from it. And that's the only one that ever gets revealed. None of the other spend conditions are ever known to anybody except for the participants.
I see.
So that's what Taproot is fundamentally that. Plus Schnnor sigs, which give you signature aggregation, allow you to do cool stuff like Frost.
Okay. Okay, fair. Yeah. Okay, that's a good little Taproot lesson. I should have Nifty come on and do a full Taproot episode.
Oh, she knows way better than me.
I was going to say, we'll do a whole Taproot episode with Nifty.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but I mean, basically TLDR though, most of these L2, the most promising L2s ultimately, in development right now, these sort of BitVM, ZKP, style L2s that are, they are not quantum resistant. I mean, this is a challenge.
A lot of the stuff is, yeah. I mean, if you're talking about using the current, like if you do a BitVM, I haven't really thought about it, but yeah, if you do BitVM, then I don't think you have to run necessarily tweaks on BitVM. So you could just use the Taproot and have a hash Taproot address for your commitment, and that'd be a good question to ask Robin.
Question to ask Robin.
But
Robin's next.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll think about that.
Yeah.
What
But
do we
yeah,
do? How do we make BitVM quantum resistant? That'll be a good question.
yeah, no, that's
BitVM implementation.
I'd be curious to hear his thoughts on it because I haven't gamed it all the way through as far as
Yeah.
limitations. But
Yeah.
I think you could do that with a hash version of Taproot, and BitVM will still work fine. But I don't know.
So interesting. So yeah, so these are kind of some of the challenges that are coming up with Bitcoin, the sort of Bitcoin L2 landscape right now that I think Anduro is like looking at, right, and like thinking about and yeah, potentially like trying to solve. Opcat. When is Opcat going to be
For Bitcoin?
when is Opcat going to be implemented on Coordinate?
Oh, on Coordinate at launch.
Oh, okay.
But
That makes sense.
Bitcoin, it's easy to do it on the sidechain because you can kind of do
You just
whatever
flip a
want on
switch.
the sidechain. You flip a switch. It's like, yeah.
Do you have a point of view about Opcat on Bitcoin?
Yes.
Do you want to share it or not?
No.
I won't force you.
Well, no.
Say something politically correct.
No, no, no. Yeah, I'm not gonna say something like, I don't know that I agree that Opcat's the way forward, or specifically. I mean, there's lesser versions of covenants that create some, but if you enable full expressivity the way that Opcat does, you effectively change what Bitcoin is and does as a network. It is no longer the same thing.
This is what I want to talk to you about. This came up at dinner last night. So I actually quoted, I think I may have quoted you on another episode, but I said something to the effect of like, Opcat could potentially, as you said, effectively changes what Bitcoin ultimately is, right? Other than the 21 million
The term
hard
I
cap.
use is it could turn Bitcoin into shitty Ethereum. So it's a version of Ethereum that is not as good as Ethereum.
But okay, so explain this. Like,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, you notice most of the layer 2 implementations that are out there, they're speculative layer 2 implementations that are rollup centric, right? And because rollups are the best thing going in the tech. Well, let's just be fair. If you can do a rollup, you can take the entire execution off main state.
Right.
But so then you don't have any of the burdens of that. So you don't have any of the burdens, but you also have none of the revenue, right? So you can see what's happened, since the Denkun update. I keep up with Ethereum. The Denkun update, which introduced proto-dank sharding into Ethereum, has been pretty disastrous.
What is proto-dank shard? I don't know any of this.
My God.
Let's just back up. Real layman TLDR, what are you talking about? So Ethereum, what happened in Ethereum?
Ethereum's been playing this game a lot longer than Bitcoin.
The L2 game.
The L2 game, the rollup game. Like,
right.
Really, because name an Ethereum rollup or L2 that's not a rollup. They all are, because that's the full optimized solution for these things if you have full expressivity, which Ethereum does.
Okay.
Then you can do ZK all the things, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, that's great, except for then everything becomes now about the L2s, which is the biggest single thing that I don't like about it. Again, coming from the Bitcoin miner perspective, is if you start doing everything on this, then you're not paying back to main chain 1, because the goal of these proofs is to make them as succinct as possible so that they don't have to pay anything back to L1.
Would you be more comfortable with an expanding L2 universe, which it does sort of look like we're moving in that direction? Would you be more comfortable with that if these L2s were all merge mining?
Well, yeah. I mean, if the L2s, I mean, and this is when you started to get into the BIP 300, conversation of it, which has been contentious to say the least. But, at least the plan for BIP 300 pays the Bitcoin miners, right? Right now, if everything moves to a model where it's just the asset only and that's all you care about, and you're doing everything in these layer 2s, and none of the activity translate except, oh yeah, well, we have state proofs that have to go back to Bitcoin. Well, that's problematic in a couple of ways. One, you end up even more centralized than the situation we have right now with mining, because you could have a couple of different of these roll-up operators that have 100% of the demand of blockchain space on Bitcoin, and everybody else is priced out.
Right.
And then at that point, they start dictating terms.
Totally.
Yeah. And then Bitcoin in that world becomes captured, which
oh man.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah. So, the pros and cons to this Bitcoin L2 world for sure.
Exactly. And then the question is, too, do we want Bitcoin to be nothing more than a data availability layer, right? Is that what Bitcoin has always been destined to be and nothing else, right? Can you not do, if you can't
This is the other side of the argument.
Well, if it's freedom, if you can't truly transact on Bitcoin, are you actually using it, right?
Right. And then the question becomes like, well, if you're able to execute, like if you're able to transact on L2s trustlessly, then maybe, but like, can we ever get there? Is that even real? Is that even really a
I
thing?
like the sidechain solution is just because what it does is it takes the demand off of Bitcoin, which is obviously very constrained, right?
Mhm.
Not too many transactions can make it through, but people will still pay premium to be on L1 Bitcoin because it's better, right? So, but for stuff that doesn't want to pay that premium, they can still do that on an L2 and it still pays the L1 miners. So Bitcoin still stays secure.
Fair.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up this conversation, I want to make sure we talk about this other interesting architectural decision of Coordinate, which was bit assets.
Oh yeah, bit assets. Yes.
So
well, that's the other huge part of it. Yeah.
Around the time that Mara had approached you about developing this L2, like when was that relative to the launch of Ordinals? Like,
Well, so they first started talking about it, early on. This was before Casey dropped ordinal inscriptions. So
what?
So yeah, it came
so
about.
They were on this tip early.
No, this is something that we've been thinking about for a
long time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it kind of exploded in us. We're a very small team, and we are not. Mara is a big company, but we do not throw hundreds of millions of dollars at this effort.
Right.
It's a very small team,
right?
And also we don't have a token, so we don't have this fundraise, and we don't have
Good reason we don't have a
well, yeah, exactly, because we don't want to be beholden to or whatever. It's and
the incentives are weird, and tokens can be problematic.
It's funny because it's kind of a grassroots effort, but it just happens to be sponsored. So
grassroots, incubated.
It's incubated. Yeah,
Mara supported.
So yeah, but I mean, again, they're setting up the federation, and they're going to be one of the charter members of the federation, and we're actively recruiting other members, but they have to be aligned with Bitcoin.
How did you decide? Was it because of sort of the rush of Ordinals mania that you decided to include bit assets?
Into it? Yeah. I mean, you can't really ignore if you're in Bitcoin and you're a miner and you're looking at the fees to get, especially because we run our own pool, right? So if you're running on FPPS and you see some of these fantastic events, right, that are going on, then you don't actually see any revenue from that because FPPS, they throw out the outliers, right? And they don't pay you based on what you make. So most people who are mining to these large pools, they don't care. But for us, it's like, wow, this is real money.
Was Bit Assets? So Bit Assets was a design created by Paul
Stortz. Yeah.
Okay.
Paul Stortz created Bit Assets back, in I want to say 7, 8, 9 years ago.
Okay.
So yeah,
the original intent was create a tokenization standard on Bitcoin.
Correct. Yeah. He, to create.
Did he want a soft fork to integrate this?
It would have been a soft fork at the time. Yeah. But, soft fork the functionality to create these asset types on Bitcoin. And then the big difference between that, because there was tons of things back in the day. You had Omni and Counterparty. Yeah. And that those were replaced with, Ordinals and BRC20, but all of them carry the same torch. They're all meta protocols, right? So it's all verified off of Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin doesn't know or care about any of these assets. If you just inspect a Bitcoin node, they don't know that you're Cat JPEG.
Paul wanted Bitcoin to recognize.
Paul
he wanted to create a native standard that
asset
Bitcoin
layer that actually recognize the existence of these assets. It's the old color coins trope. Like Vitalik was working on a Prism wallet back in the day on Bitcoin. Tether was originally launched on Bitcoin. Everything used to be Bitcoin, and we lost all of it, and it all went over to Ethereum and later Solana and whatever because Bitcoin doesn't do that. And
so folks want to know how to play with like maybe the truest Bitcoin native tokens you could possibly play with.
Yeah,
like
I mean, there's
of Bitcoin with assets built in.
So that's part of it too. I've seen this over and over and over again. I've been around through many cycles, and the ones I saw in 2013, colored coins flamed out and died because fees got too expensive, and everybody just said, no, we can't do that because we had a bull run and all anybody cared about was the price. and it just priced them out of the market and nobody cared. So, Vitalik went off to create Ethereum. Same thing 2017. You had Omni and Counterparty. You had Tether running on it. You had Rare Pepe, Spells of Genesis, a very vibrant ecosystem back then. And everybody thinks that Ethereum had the first NFTs.
No,
that's not the case. Spells of Genesis predated the CryptoPunks by like 4 or 5 months.
That's
and it's
right.
like, and that was all Bitcoin. This was all on Bitcoin. But again, it was meta Bitcoin. It was the outside indexer that held it, and
the images were off chain.
Yeah, the images were all off chain. Right. It was just the tokens. You actually tracked the token movements using an outside index. Right. Much the same way you do with ordinal inscriptions. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, the only difference is you're actually writing the data on the Bitcoin blockchain. That's a big difference.
That is a big difference.
It's a big difference because it's actually there.
Right.
And it's on the blockchain, and you can scan it and you can follow it from there. So I would say it's a definite improvement. Yeah.
I mean, night and day. Yeah. The data is on chain, right? The data availability. I actually think my hot take on ordinals is that the real quantum leap forward with ordinals is the fact that he effectively turned Bitcoin into a data availability layer for NFTs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what you can do with coordinate, it's actually pretty interesting. If you have actually consensus recognized assets, then you can start getting into games where you start building an actual decentralized exchange on the blockchain itself, where each of these activities is a fee-paying transaction. It's a fee-paying transaction to post. It's a fee-paying transaction to buy, and you place order. You on the book. That's a fee-paying transaction. Somebody takes your order. That's another fee-paying transaction. And then all this benefits the miner, and you can do it all in a decentralized manner, right?
Bit asset DEXs. Yeah, I think the history of bit assets is pretty interesting, and I love that Coordinate is integrating them. I think Coordinate is just really fun, kind of.
And you could do even more too. You could actually implement a condition, a spend, which we haven't done this yet. But for NFTs, you could actually build in the royalty of the payment on these DEXs into it. So the original, every time it gets sold, he gets paid.
Which is kind of out of vogue right now, but who knows? It could come back.
Who knows? I mean, there's lots of stuff you could do with this, but the whole idea is to give people tools, because I don't want to see it die again. I've seen it die so many times now. I want a place for it to thrive, and I'm not saying it will today, because I mean it's kind of down these days,
right?
Because you had the Ordinals inscription, then BRC20 and runes, and now nobody's doing much of anything. But
there's a lull in the market.
There's a lull. Yeah. We'll see. You never know. It might kick up again soon.
Oh, inshallah. I hope so. Oh my gosh, this was so fun, Michael. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any last minute questions I have related to coordinate algos. I think we covered quite a bit today.
There's more. There's always more.
There's some fun.
I really appreciate
I think that'll be coming up, percolating over the next year or two. You said that, you guys aren't live yet, but you'll be live at some date. Yeah.
We're working on it. Yeah.
And it's just super exciting to have you on the pod. So thank you so much for coming.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great.